Welcome to Chapter 1 of this section, Tracking Your Expenses. In order to live below your means, lowering your expenses is key. The goal is to use all the concepts we discussed in the money mindset and time value of money sections to reevaluate your expenses. Think back to the instant versus delayed gratification section, the assets versus liabilities, and opportunity costs. Now it's time to start tying all of those concepts together. Let's start by clearly defining expenses. An expense is a cost that you incur in order to meet your needs and your wants. Expenses can be put into one of three categories. Fixed expenses are consistent and predictable. You'll pay for them on a regular basis. You can think of this as things like a car payment or rent. Fixed expenses are the easiest to plan for because they're consistent. Variable expenses have an unpredictable schedule and a fluctuating cost. These can include things like food or utilities. The more you use them, the more expensive they'll be. But these expenses are a little bit more difficult to account for, and this is where your budget will come in handy. Periodic expenses are infrequent and variable. So these can be things like gifts or car maintenance every few months. For this, you can use a sinking fund, and we'll discuss that later on as well. Tracking your expenses will tell you how much of your expenses you need to save by taking into account your basic necessities like food, transportation, and your wants, like let's say subscription services. Why do you need to know this? There's three reasons. First one is that you need to understand where your money is going. If you don't know where your money is going, then you're always going to make bad decisions with your money, and you're not going to realize how much of your money is going towards something. The second thing is tracking your expenses allows you to analyze and understand your spending patterns. You may be surprised to see that you're spending so much on takeout or self-care, much more than you even expect. And this is something that I did. So when I was in huge amounts of debt, I was actually spending about $300 to $500 a month on entertainment alone, and cutting that down made a huge difference to my finances. The third reason is that knowing how much it costs for you to survive gives you a good idea of how much you should have in an emergency savings fund. We'll talk about this later in the course, but generally having about 3 to 12 months worth of expenses saved in case of an emergency is a really good idea. You can track your expenses by recording all of your individual transactions and categorizing them based on the type of expense, whether it's something like food, housing, or entertainment. But what you can do is you can track these expenses in two different you can track them using two main methods. So the first one is using an app. So for example, you may want to use something like Mint. I haven't personally used any apps, but the great thing about these apps is that they'll give you notifications if you go over your spending. They'll also, some of them also allow you to scan a receipt. For example, if you go to a grocery store, you can scan your receipt and it'll sort everything out for you. There are paid and free apps available, but like I said, I haven't used any apps myself. So this is something that you'd have to find a review on, or you'd have to figure out whether or not it works for you. So just find something that works for you. But you may not be comfortable with connecting your bank account to an app, and this is usually what's required. So the second strategy is manual. So you can use a pen, paper, and calculator, a spreadsheet, or a word processor, whatever works for you. So this method requires a little bit more work, but it worked for me because I like using spreadsheets to automate my calculations and show trends in anything that I'm looking at. I just wanted to show you what the spreadsheet that I tracked my expenses on looked like. In when I was actually tracking them, I had individual transactions. So let's say, for example, I had a Rogers bill for my internet and then a Rogers bill for my cell phone. Each one would be separate, but what I did here was I already categorized them based on the individual categories that they should be on. But all you need to do is include the date, just so you know when the transaction came up. You can include the vendor, so who you paid, the amount that you paid, the category, and this is something that you'll learn in the next section, which is the type of expense. So the type of expense is either a need, a want, savings, investing, or paying off debt. So what you can do is you can just include all of the transactions you had for the month, all of the total amounts, and then you can add those up. You can use formulas on Excel, so just simple formulas like a sum function, and you can just add them up and you can create a spreadsheet that shows you everything that you've spent your money on. And then what you can do is you can find trends. You can use the data that you come up with to find trends on what you're spending money on and where your money is going. For example, for me, tracking my expenses showed me how much I was spending on entertainment and takeout every month. So to summarize, the bottom line is here in this situation, no matter what method you use, the whole point is to have an awareness of where your money is going, and this is going to help you do that. This is going to help you make much better decisions going forward with your finances.